Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name's Sam Charlton, and I'll be looking after things this evening, or trying to, the best I can. Also pleased to introduce Jonathan Eckley, Liam Byrne and Will Jackson, who will also be joining us and hosting this evening. So we're going to start things with Jonathan, who hopefully we'll be able to see in a moment. There he is. Hello. And he's going to talk us through markets and opportunities. So I'm just going to switch screens for a second. Okay, just bear with me a second. It's just loading up, Jono, I promise. There you go.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you
Jono,
very much.
ready.
Thanks, guys. So hi, Jonathan Eckley. I'm head of Asia Pacific Export here at AHDB. I've worked in the export department here for about 10 years. So my plan this evening is to give you a quick tour of the globe. I'm going to start off just with a little bit of data, just to try and set the scene and some numbers on where we stand with our UK beef and lamb exports. And then I'm going to talk through some of the activity that we get involved with at AHDB and how we try and support those exports. Next slide, please, Sam.
Doesn't seem to want to click on. 2 seconds. There you go, Jono. 1 minute, it'll come up.
Okay, cool. So just to start with, I just wanted to put in context the importance of beef and lamb exports to the sector. So 2020 is the latest year we've got full year data for, and there you can hopefully see on your screen that both beef and lamb added nearly £900 million to the sector, so about £450 million in round figures for both beef and lamb. Just the beef exports, we were reasonably new to the market in the long-term scheme of things, where we were back in the market in 2006, and hopefully you can see on that graph there how we quickly established ourselves and got up to around about the 150,000 tonne mark. The red area on that graph just demonstrates the importance fifth quarter has shown in recent years as those markets have opened back up to us for beef exports per se, and as we've got increased access to markets further afield where there's a really strong appetite for offal. Sheep meat, we're actually the third biggest global exporter of sheep meat in the world. Australia number 1, New Zealand number 2, and then we follow number 3, followed with a step change to our fourth biggest exporter in the world being Ireland. So of beef, we export around 15% of what we produce, and obviously being a bigger sheep meat importer, we export a third of the lamb we produce. So in round figures, we produce 300,000 tonnes, and we've been exporting around about the 100,000 tonne mark every year or annually to give us that third of production. So that's how important that is for us. If we just add pork into there just for a second, because we cover AHDB export, we cover beef, lamb and pork, £600 million worth of pork in that year. So red meat export to our economy here worth 1.54 million. Has been a bit more challenging in 2021, but in the first 11 months, we've already hit 1.3 billion. So still very significant and important to our sectors. Next slide, please, Sam. Just quickly, just going to show you some monthly, or just the sort of the overall monthly trend there for the last 2 years. And I guess the standout on those slides is the first quarter of 2021, we've seen some challenges to the market. Obviously, we changed the way our relationship with the European Union. And prior to that, we could just deliver sheep meat and beef to the EU. Whereas now we're actually exporting, so health certificates and controls in place. So there was a big change at the start of the year, which certainly saw some challenges. But as you'll hopefully see on those graphs there, we have seen as the year's gone on, that's recovered and become more normal. Slightly down on last year, but still encouraging to see those exports there back in a more normal pattern as it's become more normal. Just where do we export our lamb to? So if we go to the next slide, please, Sam. So if we take lamb to start with, we'll just have a quick look at lamb. The EU is our closest market, and it's been really important for us. In the first 11 months of last year, we sent 91.5% of our shipments to the EU and 8.5% to markets outside of the EU, which have grown in importance. Not many years ago, we would have been at 96% to the EU. So we have seen those markets diverge, which is interesting, but the EU still remains really strong. It will be no surprise to you, I guess, that France is our biggest market, taking about 52% of our shipments. And it's interesting to see in the first 11 months of this year, we've actually seen a 6% increase in shipments to France. Some of those other EU markets have become under pressure, and we've seen some declines there. And overall shipments in the 11 months of the year, total lamb shipments were down about 20% on the year. Obviously, we've had really strong demand at home, which Liam will talk about in the next presentation, and how we support that trade. That's actually limited supplies available for export, and in the first part of the year, we were quite challenged as well. But those EU markets still remain strong. Germany, our second biggest market, a big ethnic population there drives some of that demand, and then Belgium there in third place. But it's interesting to see then, as we go round, see some other markets emerging. Now, the data on that graph there is actually at the end of October, where Ireland was the fourth biggest market, but by November, Hong Kong had surpassed that as the fourth biggest market. Hong Kong's a strategically important market for our sheep meat. It's a real big stepping off point for shipments around Southeast Asia. So it's an important port down there, and we've seen good growth there for both beef and lamb, and I'll talk a bit more about that on beef. And there's some other interesting destinations there that we're starting to see as we've diversified the portfolio of markets we have, including Ghana, which is very much a commodity market, but really important for our carcass balance, and some high value shipments to Canada starting to come through in the data, which is encouraging. If we look at beef markets, 70% of our exports have gone to the EU. So about a third of those go to Ireland, which is our biggest trading partner. And then France is the second one. So 70% going to the EU. Again, we've seen some downward pressure on those exports this year with the challenges around the paperwork at the start of the year, and a couple of other factors come in. But just some other important markets there that have become coming forward in the data. So again, Hong Kong, the biggest market outside the EU for our beef exports. And there's two parts to that market, I guess. As I said, a jumping off point around the rest of Southeast Asia in terms of distribution, but also traditionally a city of 8 million, population of 8 million, but in 2019, prior to the pandemic, it had 55 million visitors. So that food service sector, where a lot of our exports in both beef and lamb are consumed, was really important in Hong Kong for some of that higher value product. Another emerging market which we gained access to in 2016, which has been really strong for some commodity product this year, is we've seen a 44% increase in shipments to the Philippines. So a very price sensitive market, but for some of that fifth quarter products, it's been really good this year. So really strong growth there, up 40% and 41% in value. And again, Ghana coming into play, South Africa. And just one last market I'd like to touch on is the USA. USA is a new market to us for beef, gaining access last year. And we've seen a threefold increase, which is really good to see in just in the last since we gained access, seeing that going really strongly. There were some tariff barriers in the way, which there's a dispute with Airbus and Boeing, but those were removed in October, and that's really aided our exports to the USA. And again, some of that is for the premium end of the market, where the discerning US consumer really likes a high quality product, but also grinding beef is a really important factor going that way. Just two other challenges before I move on to talk to you more about AHDB's actual activity that we've obviously seen on international markets for the last 2 years. The global pandemic has put some pressure on, particularly in that all-important food service market, with the lack of tourism and the closure of restaurants during lockdowns. An awful lot of our product will be consumed, be it in Hong Kong, Asia, or even in Europe in that restaurant sector. So that's seen some challenges. To offset some of that, we've seen good demand here in the UK at retail. So that's offset that and actually limited some of the supplies available. And the third and last factor I'd just like to touch on just very briefly is global logistics have been really challenged. Lockdowns in China at the very early days of the pandemic saw containers in the wrong places. Ports were closed in China for 3 weeks. It was just really difficult to get access to chilled containers, frozen containers. And that knock-on effect has been going on with different restrictions around the world and blockages, and it's just been really hard. It's also made freight much more expensive. So sea freight has trebled in price to some markets, and a lot of the high value products going to places like Hong Kong or Singapore or the Middle East chilled would go in air freight. Air freight goes in the bellies of passenger aircrafts. Obviously, that sector has been really impacted, so the lack of flights has seen a real reduction in capacity and a big price hike, which has made that much more challenging. So the slide you have on your screen now, so just a little bit about some of the AHDB activity. So as I said, 1.5 billion the trade was worth us in 2020, and we'll get reasonably close to that this year, although in 2021 we'll be a little bit back. So a really important to the sector and a key area of activity for AHDB. The reasons we export. If we can attain a higher value for a customer in an international market, it adds more to the sector. So we need to develop those markets and bring that money back to the UK sector. And a really, really important part of the export work or the export story is where we have Carcass Imbalance, where at times of the year we may have surpluses and surpluses of particular cuts that are not in demand here. And as I showed on the beef graph earlier, fifth quarter exports to Asia, for example, have been a really important factor in that in helping us sell 100% of the carcass to the most appropriate market. We also continue to seek further opportunities, and I will talk to you in a second a little bit about market access. It's really, really key to our export work that we have access to the broadest portfolio of markets we can to help us spread the risk and take the biggest opportunity available to us for quality British sheep and beef meat. Next slide, please, Sam. And just go on one more, please. So what do we do? So broadly speaking, there's two areas of work in AHDB export. The first and all important area is market access, and that's supporting the opening of new markets to British beef and lamb. And the second area I'll come on to talk about is where we help develop markets. So in new markets where we try and find people for our exporters to engage with, and in more mature markets where we try and build on the reputation and differentiate British beef and lamb. So market access is an extremely lengthy process. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the steps in that and just give you an idea of some of the timescales. So the first part is a questionnaire. It's a government-to-government negotiation, and the role AHDB provides is the technical support into answering questionnaires. And those will be hundreds and hundreds of pages where an authority in an overseas market is trying to ensure that our standards are at least equivalent to theirs in terms of food safety and human consumption safety. Once the questionnaire is completed, we will get to a point where they think they've got equivalence. That will then prompt an inspection visit where we will bring people in, or the authorities will send people in to actually inspect the supply chain, and that's from farm to abattoir, and in the case of some sectors, feed mills and cold stores that the product will be dispatched from. At that point, if that goes well, you'll reach equivalence, and then the last stage is to get plant approval. In a number of markets, once equivalence is reached and the health cert is agreed, the authority will say, okay, UK, we trust you. Please tell us which plants you would like to list to send product to somewhere, maybe Japan. They will do trust DEFRA to make that decision on an internal audit. The most extreme set is China, where they would want to come and inspect individual plants. So when we've gained access to beef, all those inspection steps were done and questionnaires, and the very final step was an inward inspection where Chinese inspectors visited the UK to approve the individual abattoirs and cold stores that need to be listed. Just on the timescales for that, it took probably about 8 years, I think, for the UK to open up the Chinese market for pig meat, and I think Taiwan was one of the longest, which was about 11 years. So that it can take an awful long time. When we talk about market development, and I'll show you some images of this, there's a few areas we get involved with. Missions to market are a really important way of getting to experience and understand the dynamics of a market. So if we were going to have a new market, Japan would be an example of where we opened a Japan market in 2019, and we took 12 UK exporters, or we hosted them in Japan. They actually take themselves, where we really want to help them get under the skin of the market to really understand the dynamic of what's going on in the beef and sheep sector in terms of the imported and retail environment. The all-important part of those outward missions is actually the B2b meetings. And I'd like to pride myself that I've got quite good at speed dating in my time in export, where I'm trying to match UK exporters with overseas importers and distributors. As we all know, it's so much easier to do business with people when we've met them face to face. So by taking exporters to market, to understand the market and meet those people firsthand, it's much easier for them to then develop their business. We also have a number of people helping us in market. So if you'd just like to go to the next slide, Sam. So I'd like to say it was fortuitous. In the end of 2019, we started procuring some more overseas support prior to the pandemic, and it's really helped us through the last 2 years. Traditionally, Europe, our strong market, we've had a presence there with an office just outside Paris on the French market and some agencies around those all important North European markets to help us differentiate our product and promote it. We now have agencies both in Asia and North America to help us. So I have a team member in Beijing, he helps me on the Chinese market, and we have a PR agency in Tokyo and Hong Kong, and we work with third parties also in places like Singapore and the Philippines to try and develop those markets. We appointed an agency in 2020 in North America, which is really important to us, covering both North America and Canada. And the latest market for the UK to gain access for, which at this stage is for pig meat, but we have ambitions for the beef and sheep meat sector there. We gained access to pig meat last year, so we're in the process of appointing an agency there. Those agents overseas have really helped us understand the dynamic of the market. And while we've been restricted from travel for the last 2 years, they've really helped us maintain some momentum in those markets in engaging with the trade. For example, Holly in Beijing, where the Chinese market, the borders are closed and we can't go and promote the product or take exporters with us. But Holly's been able to attend and manage trade show stands from AHDB's point of view. A lot of the exporters from the UK or all the exporters licensed for China have people in market. So for a trade show, for example, we've been able to host those people on a trade show to engage with the trade there in Shanghai and Qingdao places. Would you like to just move on, Sam? So just some recent successes. I touched on Japan. Japan, we gained access for both beef and sheep meat in 2019. Japan, a really challenging market, but a big importer, particularly a big importer of beef. So that was really important. So it's the best market in the world for beef tongues, for example. So we had exporters out there in 2019. They've been precluded from travel, restricted for the last 2 years, but they have been able to still grow that business through some of the introductions they've made at trade shows and missions to market. And we've seen some really strong growth there at the end or the second half of last year, which is encouraging, and we'd like to develop that market further. The Taiwanese market is open for pork for the UK, and we're hopefully getting to the stage where we can open that market for sheep meat. One thing on market access that's been really challenging over the last 2 years is inward inspection visits, where inspectors would probably have come from Taiwan to the UK in 2020 or last year to inspect the lamb supply chain to move that access forward, but because of global travel restrictions, they haven't been able to. We and DEFRA have pushed really hard for video audits, but a lot of authorities have not been keen to do that, although we have seen some progress on that, and we did see some video audits in the pork sector towards the back end of last year, and we'd like to see that moving forward. But hopefully as travel opens up, we can get some of those inspectors back in to look at those plants, broaden our access to some markets where we have some access to, and get new markets open. Another ones on the list for the sector are the Chinese beef market opened last year, and we would start making progress on lamb access to that, the biggest market in the world. So it's really important to us going forward. Vietnam even, I could speak, is on the list there for pork. So that's the start of a journey. A large consumer of protein, and we'll have the staged approach from the UK that we're going to look at the pork market first, because that's really important in Asia. But once we get that one moving, then we can move on to beef and lamb. South Korea is probably about the third largest importer of beef in the world. So that journey has started, where we're working very closely with the embassy and market and the authorities here in DEFRA to move that access journey forward to take advantage of that. Trade shows are a really important part of our activity. 3 reasons we go to a trade show. The first, of course, is to win new business. So we want to host our exporters on a cost-effective platform to introduce them to new people in market. which is the first and very important reason to go, particularly when we're new to market. The second reason to go is to maintain your existing business. It's a really competitive space out there, and if you're not there, somebody will try and have that business. And in a lot of markets, be it North America or Asia, that face-to-face interaction is really important. We've actually done some research with our exporters and importers in markets recently, and one thing they're really keen to get back to is face-to-face meetings, because you can really read the room better and make that business happen. What we've had to do, if you move on, Sam, please. So just some examples before I talk about a bit of digital and the virtual world that I've become very used to. So just 3 examples of activity here at different stages of the market. So if I start top right, which is a mature market, which is some of the activity promoting and differentiating our product in the European market, where we have a reasonable reputation and we need to keep building on that to build on the reputation and the quality of the product we have. So a lot of that work is actually getting out in front of consumers to drive demand for the product and drive sales. And we have that kind of activity going on in France and Belgium and Germany, Italy, and also in Eastern Europe to keep driving that reputation business. If I go clockwise right, the 2 images at the bottom of the screen is a new market to us, which is Japan. This was an event we held on the 16th of September last year, where the example of what I call speed dating, the business-to-business introductions. While we haven't been able to travel, we did this virtually. I was delighted to get up at 4 a.m. to talk to some Japanese buyers. We managed to bring nearly 80 people together in a hotel in Tokyo. So key importers and distribution in the supply chain there, to present them about the quality, production and safety standards we produce our beef and lamb to here in the UK. Alongside that, they were able to taste the product, which is really important with a tactile product. So we gave beef and lamb samples to them. And then we moved to the all-important B2b meetings, where we had 9 exporters, and they literally had a virtual booth with a laptop and an interpreter, and the 9 companies in the UK were able to dial into their offices and have 20-minute meetings with all those people in the room. And the third example was in Dubai in November, where 6 exporters were hosted at the embassy, where we ran a showcase event. That market is slightly more mature than somewhere like Japan, and there are existing suppliers in market. So it's about building on the reputation and getting that product in front of key decision makers, be it distributors and importantly chefs into the food service sector. Would you like to move on, Sam? So very quickly on this slide, and then we'll go to one more on the virtual world, and then I think I'll hand over to Liam. So just working with government. So just some examples here. We work with government and embassies. In my world of development, we work really closely with embassy officials to help us engage with the trade in markets. And a really important part of that is working under the Food is Great banner. So the Food is Great banner is a government campaign on promoting exports, and the food pillar is really important to us. And the branding really supports what we do. And if we go to a trade show and we're under that great banner, it really gives the UK some kudos and expands our offer across all the sectors. And being under that Union Jack there on a Food is Great pavilion gives us a really good platform to engage with the trade. Next slide, please. So just touch on the last 2 years, whereas on the left there, the team would have spent an awful lot of time prior to the pandemic overseas at trade shows, at missions, at showcase events, getting product in front of people. We simply haven't been able to do that. So I'm proud of the export team here at AHDB, how they managed to pivot into the digital world. It was great that we had the appointment of some agencies well underway when the pandemic struck, which has really helped us maintain momentum. And a credit to our digital team at AHDB, who've gone out and taken the UK virtually to market. Whereas we haven't been able to go and meet people, there's an awful lot of great video content being done to support the work we do. We've been able to talk to people about the great standards we operate here from the farm through the supply chain to produce that quality product. We've still got product out in market, so those assets have really helped us, and pushing those out on digital channels in Asia and America has been really important to engage with the trade. Right, Sam, do you just want to pick on a couple? Okay, so we're just nearly there. just back on the road, Anuga was the first big trade show to happen last October, where we took a stand and we had 9 exporters join us. So it was good to be back at a trade show. Still proving challenging, but some good business was done there. The exporters that joined us were really pleased with that show. It is the biggest food show in the world, and people that travelled there, it was quite European centric this year because of the travel restrictions, but people were there to do business, and that was really evident, and people were able to spend more time than normal at a really busy show with lots of tyre kickers. This year there weren't any, so it was really good to be engaging with the trade, and it whet the appetite to get back to that. The last area to touch on is just market insight. So we work really closely with our colleagues in market intelligence, because all the work we do needs to be based on insight into what's happening around the world. From our market access work, trying to identify markets that hold great potential for UK export, to consumer insight, which Liam will talk about more on the domestic market, but we've just done a big piece of work in Asia and America. It's really important for us with our messaging and our campaigns to understand what drives the consumers to purchase beef and lamb. And we can use that data to tailor our campaigns accordingly, so they're really focused on what those consumers are looking for in the market. And one more, Sam. So just looking forward, market access is really key to us, so we will continue to drive that and open as many markets as we can so we have that broad portfolio. We need to foster the support we've got in market and enhance that with our PR campaigns and our showcasing events, and get back to trade shows will be really important. I think we will, the global pandemic, one thing it will do with trade shows, when we get moving again, it will revitalise those, and they'll become a really good platform to re-engage with the trade in a number of markets. So while we need to focus on our markets close to home and to continue to develop and maximise out the potential of those mature markets, we also need to keep working to open more third country markets and grow that opportunity that some of those markets in Asia have. So I think, Sam, there are a couple of videos, but I'm not sure they're going to work, so I think we might just take questions.
Thank you, Liam. I'm sorry, Jono, Liam is next. Thank you very much for that. You can take a pause just to let the audience know that we will be taking questions throughout. We've got some intervals to take some questions, so any questions that you do have, just remember to click on the yellow arrow on your toolbar. It may be orange for some of you. Just click on that arrow and type in your question in the question box, and we'll get to those. Just one question that we do have, Jono. Yep. How are AHDB involved in ensuring that trade deals are fair? So this is in terms of animal welfare and product quality.
The trade deal is very much a government-to-government relationship. So a couple of things on that. So we're very involved in the market access side and the technical support into that. The FTA responsibility sits clearly with government, and obviously we can't lobby them as AHDB, but what we can do as an evidence provider is just ensure that the evidence is put in front of the decision makers.
Thank you very much. If anybody else has got any questions for Jono, he isn't going to disappear. I'm sure you'll be lurking in the background somewhere, so just pop those questions, like I say, in the box, and hopefully we will have Liam who is going to join us next. Liam, if you could, there he is. Excellent. Always good to see that face pop up.
You're doing well, Sam.
Thank you. All right, so the slides do move on, Liam. There's a little bit of a delay, so just keep telling me when you want me to.
You can, yeah, just to introduce myself then, I'm Liam Byrne. I'm Director of Marketing at AHDB. It's great that you've been able to join us today. I'll just do a canter through, but I wanted just to talk about some of the work that we're doing to support consumer demand on the domestic market. And our job effectively in marketing is to add value back to your businesses. So we do that in 4 ways. We work really closely with our market intelligence team, and that's to look at the evidence and the data. And then we transform that data then into tangible insight, and then we work up and down the supply chain from the farm gate all the way through to the large retailers to activate. And normally when we get all of our stakeholders working together on campaigns, that's when we get the biggest returns. And generally we're looking kind of 3 to 5 years ahead. We're focused on those long-term gains, but we do pivot where necessary to deliver the short-term impact. And a good example of that was in COVID, when we had the lockdown and this kind of perfect storm really of people panic buying low commodity mincemeat, if you remember that. And then also we had restaurants having to close their doors pretty much overnight. So we were left with an imbalance of carcass, and that was predominantly focused on an imbalance of hindquarter cuts. And pretty much within a week, we pulled together a steak campaign encouraging people to eat hindquarter steak at home, and it made the national headlines, as you can see here. But importantly, if you just click on one, it delivered an additional 1,000 tons of hindquarter steak sales and brought nearly over 400,000 new buyers into the steak category. So back to that point of adding value to your businesses. If you just click on one, but we are focused on those long-term gains. And right now you can't turn on your TV, or it certainly doesn't feel like it, or open a magazine without feeling like there is a lot of debate out there. And sorry, we just go back. George Monbiot, who is this political activist and environmental activist, he said that shopping has become a moral minefield for many. So it's why we launched the We Eat Balance campaign, and that's all aimed at driving, cutting through that noise and giving farming and our food a voice, and reconnecting consumers with the food and the farms from which it came. And it's focused in 3 areas. The first is that vitamin B12 is an essential nutrient that's not naturally present in a vegan diet. The second key message is that meat and dairy from Britain is one of the most sustainable in the world. And the third is that meat and dairy from Britain are produced to world-class food and farming standards. And we have a long evidence book that is able to substantiate those claims, which means we can go out and say them. And indeed, when we launched this campaign back in January, the vegans didn't like it at all, and we had over 500 complaints. And I think it was on track pretty much to be one of the most complained about adverts of 2021. But if you click on one, please. But because of the evidence that we had to substantiate what we were saying, we were actually able to defend ourselves. And this wasn't really a win for AHDB as such. This was a win for livestock farming and the future prosperity of animal product agriculture and marketing. If you just click on one. And when we were running the campaign, you would be forgiven for thinking that the whole world had gone vegan. And again, we're back in that month where there seems to be a real kind of anti-meat and dairy rhetoric. But what we found, if you click on one, is that behind that vocal minority of people that shout very loudly actually sit a silent majority of people that are wanting to understand more about our food and farming stories, are wanting to cut through those misnomers and mistruths and get to the facts. And what we found when, as a result of running the campaigns, is that we saw some really positive shifts in attitudes to our products. And you can see meat there on the left. Meat and health, attitudes to meat and health went up, attitudes to meat and naturalness and sustainability went up. And what that did, if you look at the bottom there, is it protected and grew purchase intent. So more people saying they're likely to continue putting meat in their shopping basket as a result of seeing that campaign. And so it's why we're back on TV again, and we're back on TV through the month of January and through February, and that's complemented across video on demand and social media and print, and hopefully you've all seen and been exposed to the adverts. That's the TV ad, so I think we'll skip that based on the sound qualities.
It's taking a while to skip through, Liam. Just
All right, no problems.
Do you want to just continue talking while I try and get your slide deck back? 2 seconds, Liam.
Yeah, no problems at all. So we launched with the TV advert. It's got 3. You can see lamb in the oven there. It's actually got 3 different starts to the TV ad. There's one featuring a leg of lamb. There's one featuring a joint of beef, and there's a third one that features a shoulder of pork. And so each product will get a proportion of its time featured on TV, and those proportions are based on the income that we had come in when we produced the TV ad. So lamb and beef will both be on TV 4 times each in every 10 episodes, or every 10 adverts that are shown. And then we also had some press adverts that went out to complement it, and they all feature this young girl called Nancy. And we'll come on and show you some of that creative shortly. And then we had that those messages were backed up through social media, and they all kind of set a scene. So they were quite a light-hearted touch to introduce the campaign to consumers. But what we did find through the focus group work, there's some of the ads. If you just skip on.
It is working, Liam. Just
that's all right, don't worry.
Moving on your screen, Bobby.
You can just go on again.
Yeah.
I think it's moving.
It is, but very, very slowly. Let me just try and get you to where you need to be, Liam. I'll just stop sharing for a moment. Oh, no, there we go. Should have worked by now.
Yeah, so to back what we found in the focus groups was that there were certain sections of our target groups that really wanted more information. They wanted more facts. So to complement the kind of the setting of the scene that the TV ad does so well, we then back that up with a range of farmer stories, and these are all stories told by farmers about the work that they're doing on the journey to, in this case, on the journey to net zero. And then all of that anchors back then to a new website, and I'd encourage you all to go and have a look, especially at the frequently answered questions pages, because there we tackle kind of more challenging questions around livestock and environment, or meat and health, or meat and cancer. So, you know, if you're being called out, or if you just want to know the kind of a right thing to say, we've got some suggestions through the Q&As on this site, and they've all been validated by experts, either from the British Nutrition Foundation or third-party scholars that we work with. If you just click on one. I think you just need to click it as soon as it comes up.
It's this northern internet. It's slow.
Do you want me to try from Shropshire, Sam? Are you okay?
Yeah, I think I need to. Bear with me a second.
So I think this is going to be the retail slide, and we just wanted to introduce, you know, we have huge support from all of the big 9 retailers when we come to running these campaigns. and given that this year we're at a time of year where the focus of January very much for them, you would think that they would want to be focusing on their plant-based products. Actually, we've had unanimous support in this space, and we've chosen to focus our key message on B12. And if we've got any processors on the calls, they've been supporting inputting stickers on packs, and we're stickering over 9 million packets of meat over the course of January. But then we've also got various point of sale parts. You can move on one. There we go. Various kind of point of sale at the shelf, and then we're even kind of on the side of milk and stickers on the sides of chillers, and yeah, really good support from the retailers. You move on one. And you're complementing that support, we've also had good support from the sectors themselves. You can click on one. So if you want to get involved, it's all there. As I said, there's information on the website, but the easiest way is just to follow us. So you can follow AHDB Twitter, or you can follow the We Balanced Instagram and Facebook pages, and that means all you need to do is click share and just sharing out the content. And we've got content going out pretty much every day of the week if you click on one. But for those that maybe want a little bit more of the detail, we've also produced a pack, and there's one for meat and there's one for dairy. And again, there's more information in there in terms of clever stats and Q&As, and then there's also some simple steps. So even the most if you're a complete beginner in the space of social media, you should be able to just work your way through this book and be posting before you know it. If you just click on. So I was just going to, I'll tell you what, I'll just verbalise. I was just going to finish up by saying that's a lot of the promote work that we're doing, but we also do quite a lot on the protect side as well. And that means that we are scanning through social media and digital content, and we are looking for information that we don't believe to be true. You can just scroll on. And that information, and again, a recent example is Meatless Farm. So Meatless Farm put out a campaign about 4 to 8 weeks ago, and it featured a nurse, and there was another one with a fireman. And the nurse is saying that going meatless improved her mental health, and we know that that's just not true. So we called out the campaign, we wrote to Meatless Farm, but we also write and present our evidence to the Advertising Standards Authority. And you can see there that, again, this made the national headlines, but as a result of our work, Meatless Farm had to retract and pull their campaign. And you will have seen more recently, there were 100 complaints put in against an Oatly ad, and that Oatly ad was they were making disingenuous claims about both meat and dairy emissions. And again, Oatly have had to retract that and won't be able to use those statements again. And our only real, we're working with the ASA and we're putting these things through. What we want and what we'll be looking at next year is how we can work to get some quite slightly quicker results. But from an ASA perspective, we appreciate that these claims in the space of environment and health are incredibly complex. So the Advertising Standards Authority themselves at the moment need the time to work through them. But there's just 2 of the recent complaints that we put in that just help to level the playing field. You can click on. And just final as well, I mentioned about the retailers. Well, the household penetration of red meat currently sits at about 90%, which means that in any given year, 90% of the UK primary shoppers in this country will stand in front of this aisle, and this is pretty much a fair reflection what you're seeing on this screen now of what those primary shoppers will see. And when we've researched it, the shoppers have said, look, you know, it's not a particularly nice place to shop. It's uninspiring. It's verging on beige. There's no information about the sustainability of the products inside or the nutritional values of those products. If you consider that beef and lamb both have, you know, upwards of 8 essential nutrients in the meat, there's no communication of that on pack. At best, you get a picture of the animal, so you get a picture of the cow or the pig, and we know that consumers don't like to think about that when they're eating the products. So we've been working with the retailers, and we're looking at how do we redesign these spaces to make them more engaging, because if we can re-engage shoppers, that's again how we keep them in the category. And this is difficult, you know, this is difficult space that we're operating in. Organizations have tried before, but as you know, we within AHDB are uniquely placed because we're not operating at that category level. We can operate at a total meat or red meat level, and we've been working with the processors and the retailers to see how do we move these spaces on. And if you click on one, this is the result of one of those pilots that we ran, and I won't name the retailer, but we've actually got several different retailers now currently running these pilots, and you can see actually the step change in terms of feel, and you can see now how we're starting to put the values back into the products on the shelf. And they ran a series of these, some focused on the provenance, some focused on the taste and enjoyment inspiration, but unanimously what they saw was they saw heightened engagement with shoppers. And in this instance that you're seeing here, actually the plan is now to roll these out to more supermarkets in 2022. So we anticipate seeing more of this, and hopefully you'll see it in your local supermarket too. And this is difficult space because this is about driving long-term change. This isn't about having a sticker on a pack for 6 weeks of the year. And so I think that's me in a nutshell. Apologies for the slight delay in the slides, but I hope what you took away there was we are operating in the space of actively promoting your products, giving consumers the confidence that if they're buying a product from Britain, they're buying one with one of the lowest carbon footprints and some of the highest welfare standards in the world. Plus, we're actively defending your reputation. I've given 2 examples there of the work we've been doing against Meatless Farm to make them retract that campaign, and then also more recently with Oatly on some of the disingenuous claims they were making around the meat emissions from livestock. And then thirdly, then we're also then actively working proactively in terms of driving that more engaged consumer at the shop front. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have got a couple of questions for you actually, so you can't shoot off straight away, I'm afraid. So first question is an opinion question actually. What is your opinion on some of the major retailers' advertisements regarding not eating meat to do your bit for the planet? And then on the back of that, should retailers be doing more to promote British produce?
Okay, so opinion-wise on the not eating meat to save the planet, I think this comes back to the narrative for me around balance. And we respect that everybody has their choice in terms of what they want to eat and how they want to eat it. But actually, that narrative around balance means by its virtue that you can eat bits of everything really. And if you get that right, and the British Nutrition recently did a study that if you follow the Eat Well guide, that gives you the broadest intake of nutrients, but also if you follow the Eat Well guide, that by virtue gives you a more sustainable diet, and meat and dairy is included as part of that plate. So I wonder whether I think that the narrative isn't quite the narrative obviously isn't quite right in my opinion. I don't think it's as simple as simply saying that cutting meat is better for the environment. It's far more complex than that, and avocados and air miles from Mexican cartels and the like, just prove that, and some of the damage that almond milk does is kind of well versed too. So it's not as as simple as that. However, I think the writing is there, and people are looking for our industry to make a step change, and they're willing and receptive to us being able to tell our story. It's just down to us really as an industry now to show that progression. And I think if we can just show that in very simple state, then people will continue to be advocates of the products and continue to buy it. On the British front, I think the retailers do quite a bit in terms of British. I know Asda recently came out from a sourcing perspective and said that they were going to have to move from British to, I think, British and Irish. But generally, when we look at the bigger retailers, their sourcing policies, especially around beef and lamb when it's in season, is on the whole 100% British. Pork is we're talking about pork is a slight anomaly, but there's some carcass balance challenges there anyway, because we just physically don't have enough legs of pork in this country to service all the kind of ham and bacon requirements. So we have to import it. We just wouldn't have enough pig meat to fulfill the demand in this country.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Liam. And I mean, during lockdown and through the pandemic, we've seen a big increase in consumers buying locally. And we've been speaking to farmers that have seen that increase themselves. Do you think that's something that we'll ever see in the supermarkets, a more commitment to buying locally as well?
I think it's a hard thing to define. I think Co-op have tried to do it with a kind of a community focus on what they do, and Budgeons to a degree do that. But from a shopper perspective, still number one is taste and enjoyment, and then you've got price, and provenance is in there, but it's not in there for the majority. And with the campaign work that we're doing, we're trying to target, it's about 20% of the population that are kind of on the fence. And they tend to be the more affluent shoppers because they have the money to be able to switch out into other products. So they might be the ones looking at provenance, but most people, when if you watch them and observe them at the supermarket shelf, they're looking for the deals. They're looking for they're looking on price, and then they're looking at physically examining the products to see which one is most attractive.
Yeah, definitely. And then just finally, which sort of leads on from what you're talking about there, Liam. I mean, how do you decide the perfect pitch for the adverts for AHDB? Where does that information come from, and how do you decide who to put them in front of?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we do the work up front. As I said, we work with the market intelligence team, and part of that is about understanding who our target audience is. You're never going to be able to please all the people all of the time. So in this instance, it's about those meat and dairy waverers, so the people that are kind of on the fence, and they tend to have a high interest in ethical issues or environment or health. And we're able to track that. It could be as simple as looking at their profiling of what types of things they follow on social media. And they're the people that we want to talk to. We're less interested, if I'm honest, in talking to people that are high advocates, like high consumers of meat, because the likelihood is they're going to be buying it anyway. So we're trying to get to those people that are reducing their meat and dairy consumption. And what we do is, once we know who they are, we get them in, and we do focus group work with them. So we get them in a room, or we get them on a panel like this, and we talk to them, and we show them different creatives. And it starts, the first round is very much almost like sketches on a piece of paper, because you don't want to spend a whole load of money before you get to the idea. But each time you're looking to filter through, you're looking to get to a winning route. And generally that means that it's of interest to them, so they're going to kind of take a step back and watch it. But it really clearly communicates the message for them. So we do a lot of that work ahead of actually investing the money to build the creatives, and that the answers come from the audience themselves. and it would be really, really, it would be terrible if we decided it amongst ourselves in a darkened room, because I'm not that audience. So it's not down to me. And sometimes we've produced adverts before and I've not liked them, or I don't get them, and then I have to remind myself, I'm not that target audience, and that's really important. And then you're always surprised at the end when it delivers the results. But it's because it's because we have to design that with the end consumer in mind. So we get them to tell us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Liam. Really interesting stuff. Anybody got any further questions for Liam? Please do just continue to ask them, and we'll catch up with any additional questions at the end, Liam. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Will Jackson, it's joins us now. And Will, I believe you're going to share your own slides.
Yes. Well, let's see if this works now.
Okay. All right.
I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right. Does that come up yet?
No, not yet. You just need to select your screen that you want to share, Will.
Hold on 1 second. Right.
If you've got split screen, you'll have to share the correct screen. So it's your other screen. Yeah, if you make that large. If you make that large.
I knew I'd get.
And then present.
Am I working now? Am I on and up and running? Yeah. Excellent. Right, that's good news. Thanks, Sam. I think it's probably better. So, first of all, good evening, everybody. I'm Will Jackson, and I am Divisional Director of Engagement at AHDB, which essentially means that I'm responsible for everything outward facing at AHDB. So, everything from what we do through communications to the KE teams and everything else. I think just following on from what Liam was talking about before about how they set the adverts, I think it's really key to say as well that Liam is an absolute expert marketeer in his own right, and they've got an absolutely brilliant team that help build everything behind there. So whilst we're going to the customer and asking and making sure we've got the right thing, there's a fantastic team that we have in AHDB and make sure that everything is put in the right place at the right time. And I think you've been able to see tonight from not just Liam, but from Jono as well, just what brilliant experts we have in many different fields who are looking at all the areas. And what we've been talking about tonight is a lot of adding the value to products. And then, we've also got the KE team on here tonight who are absolutely fantastic about working on farm and helping deliver all these messages out there, as well as the kind of the technical work, which we'll come and talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. What I just want to talk about very, very quickly for a start is, as you can see on the slide at the moment, Shape the Future is something that you may have heard mentioned recently. You may have heard people talking previously about a vote at AHDB. So what I really wanted to do is just run through what that is, what it means, and how you can get involved. Are you all right, Sam? You just reappeared.
Yeah.
Have I done something?
No, you haven't. If you just put it on to present a few, Will, so that it's on full screen, we can see.
I said I'd done that, so I thought that would have come up as presenter screen. Is it not? Is it not?
It's not large at the moment. No, I mean we can see the screens. Yeah, click that, and that should.
Is that it? Or is it still not doing it?
It's still not doing it, but we can see the slides. So just.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll run through them in a bit of noise.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to try. Right, I'm going to try again, Sam, and we'll see if this works this time. We're doing well. It's brilliant. We were having to do these through lockdown and everything when it's not quite working. Right, okay. I want to try sharing again, Sam, now and see if that potentially works this time. No?
Just give it a minute because there's a really long delay with it. Yeah, much better. That's it. Thanks, Will.
Okay, lovely. That's fine. Thank you. So what I just want to talk about with Shape the Future. So what's happening within AHDB at the moment is we are trying to get the views of levy payers on the work that we undertake. And there's been a lot of talk about over this last year in terms of changes that happen in AHDB and what that means. What we want to do over this next couple of months now is make sure that as we come to the decision making for what work should be undertaken by AHDB over this next 5 years, is that we are making sure that levy payers' views are all taken into account when that happens. So that's why we've launched Shape the Future, and it's about getting that understanding. So in a few minutes, I'll try and run you through what the questions are going to be. But one of the key things to say to everybody for a start is that if you're going to take part in Shape the Future, then you need to register. So you have to register with us at AHDB, and that will mean that basically you're eligible to vote. The reason that we want you to register is that it's really important to us that we make sure that only people who are valid to register and to vote do get the opportunity to do so. And to do that, we have to make sure that we have their details and we have the details correctly. It only takes 2 minutes to register. So if you jump onto the AHDB website and click on Shape the Future, which will be the first box that appears, then you go in and it's entering just some very basic details of who you are, where you are, and what your business is. And then you're registered. And then when it comes to the vote taking place, you'll get a little bit of information through. You'll be able to go in and do it. So what are we going to be asking? So what happens within that when you go in to do the Shape the Future process? Well, the first thing is that we'll be covering 4 main areas. So this is about the work that we undertake. This isn't about whether AHDB exists or not. It's about the work that's done. So what we want to know is, what we'll do is, we'll first of all, we'll give you a bit of information about where the levy spend is at the moment. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. Then we're going to ask 3 questions. And the 3 questions are around what the sector needs are, so what challenges are there out there, and what are the sector council, who are the representatives within AHDB of levy payers, going to be making their decisions based on. So that will be around the things that we've discussed tonight. So it will be about enhancing the reputation of the industry. It will be about making sure that we're getting the best value for the product, both domestically and abroad. So we'll be laying out the challenges that we think are the key things that we are facing in the sector. People will then have the ability to be able to say either agree or disagree with those. And actually, if you disagree, have we missed something out? And so there'll be the option to add something in if you don't think it's been covered off. We'll then ask you questions about the work streams. So on the beef and lamb side of things, there'll be about 10 of these, and it's basically the work that we undertake. And you'll get the opportunity on a 1 to 5 basis to be able to say either that is really important to me or not important at all. And some examples of things that we'll be doing are things that we've talked about tonight. So domestic marketing campaigns, exports, helping navigate the new way of farm payments. All the main work streams that we undertake at AHDB, market intelligence, will be up there, and we'll get a view from levy payers on actually how much each of those areas is valued. And that will then be able to help feedback to the sector council, who will be able to use that information to make a real sound judgment on what they want us to undertake as the executive at AHDB. The last question that will be asked is about the sector council. So the sector council at the moment is made up of levy payers and people from the supply chain, and those are the decision making on behalf of levy payers. So what we're going to be doing in future is that if anybody is to be able to be appointed onto the sector council, that has to be approved by levy payers before it takes place. So what will happen is that as part of the questions that you're asked on Shape the Future, the last one will be, these appointments are being proposed by an independent appointment panel, and do you agree with them? Yes, no. And for anybody to be able to move on to delivering on the sector council, they will have to have the support of levy payers. So they're the 3 areas that we're going to be asking people to have their say on. And what that will do is allow a really, really clear picture to be pulled together about what the want is from levy payers to make sure that we are delivering the right work and we're delivering it in the right way. There's lots of things out and about at the moment, so you'll see us being the farming press, you'll hear us on various programs, and also there are, and I think ruminant news, for anybody who receives ruminant news, is hitting the doorsteps today and tomorrow. So there will be lots of information about Shape the Future and about what we are talking about. So I guess that kind of leaves me with a couple of things just to cover off. So there will be an example in there about what the levy is spent on at the moment, and we'll be looking to update this to make sure that when we come with those questions about the work streams, that they're represented, so that you can understand what we are asking you to have an opinion on. So I guess that if you can see the graphic that's up on the screen at the moment, what we've tried to do is we've tried to break down the levy that's collected on each animal, and then actually roughly what that's divided down into, to give you a bit of an idea. So we've got a catalogue example here, and there is a sheep example that sits on there as well. These are all available on the website. But essentially what we're saying is that for the £5.40 levy that is collected on each animal, so that's £4.05 from the producer and then £1.35 from the processor. Of that total £5.40, these are the areas that these are the main areas that money's spent on at the moment. So we've talked about a couple in quite detail there. So we've talked about market to the consumer, which is wheat balance, and John has had a long talk about the export development work. I guess I've just thought it would be a good idea to touch on one or two of the others. And it's probably worth also pointing out some of the costing of this. So for all the export work that Jono was talking about earlier on, including the trade shows, including the work that we do with government to help make sure trade to make market access is delivered, is £1.63 per animal, and it's £1.21 for all the stuff that you've seen about Eat Balanced and the adverts and everything that sits behind those. I guess some of the other stuff that underpins that are like the market trade data. So you might be aware that some of the data is kind of readily available, which will be stuff in the back of the Farmers Weekly and Farmers Guardian every week, which calculate the prices for cattle and for sheep in the back of the publications. Now we do all the calculations about that, we collect the data and then deliver that. Well, that only just scratches the surface in terms of what we do with data and information. We've got a huge amount of things that go on to be able to actually look at export markets and say, right, what are the right markets to be tackling at the moment, and which way should we be looking at them? To be able to help with the evaluation of the consumer campaign, to make sure it's the right thing to be able to deliver, to be able to go to government and be able to help them make the right decisions in terms of policy, because we can provide impartial evidence that helps people be able to make, again, evidence-based judgments rather than making decisions on a whim. So that market and trade data sits really clearly underneath what we're delivering. And a good example, if you want to go and have a look on the AHDB website, is the outlooks that we've done just recently, where we have a look forward over the next 12 months and think about what we predict will happen in the various markets and what the main factors are at play when those are as those develop over the next 12 months. So another one is the piece around working with you. So 68p helps support our strategic farm network, which the KE team run and operate, which has got a huge amount of detail on how businesses have been able to absolutely make the best of their situation, about how businesses are tackling the looming reduction in BPS payments, and how we can actually help put more technical expertise in your hands, and also running things like tonight and various other events that will hopefully help people be able to make the absolute most of their businesses. There's a piece on animal health, genetics and environment. We all know that environment is becoming more and more important as time goes by, and is moving up in consumers thinking. So we have to make sure that we're equipped in the right way, and that we can prove that as an industry and as a sector that we are doing our absolute best to be able to deliver the best the best position in terms of our environmental impact, and that demonstrate that we are doing the right things, and actually we're already well ahead of a lot of other people in terms of what we're doing. But that also works for welfare and works for other areas that we're looking at. So those kind of technical research pieces are really, really important, and that can be anything from looking at carbon and potentially sequestration, right through to key challenges like endemic disease. So there's a huge amount that goes on there as well. And then there's a very small amount at the moment that's sat on the farm to fork traceability, which is livestock information, which again is something that will be looking to underpin the movement of any animal, and therefore be able to help us in our battle to be able to get into as many markets as we possibly can be, while we're able to prove that actually if there is a challenge here, we're well on the way to be able to deal with it quickly, and that we have all that traceability back to the farm, so everybody feels comfortable in the product that they're buying. So they're just a few more examples of the areas that we operate in as an organisation, and I mean, really, I could sit here all night and talk about many more. But I think that's a good starting point in terms of where we are at the moment. So they're the key things outside of what we were. And Sam, I was going to stop at that point, and I was just going to kind of open up to any questions. But while you're doing that, and I'm not sure, how do I stop sharing my screen now? I do it like that. I think, am I back on the middle now?
You are, yes. We can just see you.
Yeah, so I was just going to, so the one bit I was just going to touch on was somebody asked a question at the beginning to Jono about the trade deals and how we ensure parity in trade deals. And Jono talked a bit about the technical aspect of it. I think the other piece to talk about as well is that, you know, we don't dictate government policy. Government will make their decisions in terms of what they want to do in terms of trade deals. But one thing that we do try and do is make sure that we're balancing the argument. So we spend a lot of time talking to, whether it be the Department of International Trade, whether it be DEFRA, to make sure that they are fully aware of any implications of decisions that they might make. Now, we know that there's been a bit of backlash against some of the trade deals that have been announced from an agricultural point of view with Australia and New Zealand. I think that some of the challenges that have been put forward are probably not going to come to fruition because of where New Zealand and Australia are, and access to their market being really close. But on the build up to that, we have been very firm with both DEFRA and the Department of International Trade about actually what the implications of these trade deals might be, and actually how it may affect affect our sector. So while we're constantly working on market access and the technical aspects of that, making sure that the abattoirs are in the right place, making sure that the paperwork's filled out and everything, we are also providing a huge amount of evidence behind the scenes to make sure that we're trying to get the right outcome for farmers as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Do you want to take the question now, or do you want to keep going for a little bit longer?
No, go. I mean, I'm happy to carry on.
Okay. Do you want to share your slides, Will, or do you want to take these questions now?
Oh, sorry, no. So I was done in terms of my slides, Sam.
Okay, no problem. So, all right. So, yeah, great. Thank you. So the first question is around governance. So you talked about the formation of the new council. How does that differ from what we used to see with the AHDB boards? Yeah,
okay, right. So there's one or two slight differences. So previously we had the AHDB Beef on board, and have now become the sector council. And I think that there are two or three main changes. I guess the first one is that we are being very clear that the sector council will now have the final say on what work is undertaken by us as AHDB. So they will have as I've said before, we'll present the evidence back from the vote that's undertaken. Well, they'll also be aware of what else is happening in the marketplace, what's happening internationally, but then they will make a decision on what we undertake as AHDB. It will then be up to us as the executive to say basically how we deliver that. So there's a lot more direct decision making in terms of what will happen from a beef and lamb point of view being taken by the sector council. So they have quite a lot more responsibility in that terms. I think it's probably worth saying from a governance point of view as well that there's been quite a reformation at the AHDB main board level. And I think there's been a bit of worry before that there's been that decisions that affect the sectors have been taken by the main board. Well, what the main board here are here for at AHDB is to oversee and make sure things have been done in the right way. So it's to be able to make sure that the balance is right, that we're performing as a team within AHDB, because if we're not doing our job, somebody needs to be able to hold us to account. So that's what the main board are doing to a huge degree. Each of the sector councils that we have, so the Beef and Lamb Sector Council chair is Colin Bateman, and he also sits on the main board. So he's able to feed through any issues that come from a beef and lamb point of view and make sure that they are that they're dealt with if there is anything in terms of performance or issues that need taking forward. And I think that one of the key changes to the governance is the piece that I've just talked about, in that the recruitment to that now is going to be undertaken by an independent panel. So Colin, as the chair of the Beef and Lamb Board, will be joined by 2 independent people from industry to make that appointment. And then when those have made the appointment, those people have to be ratified onto the sector council by levy payers before they go on. So there's a much greater say for levy payers on who represents them within AHDB. And so it's probably just worth saying that the makeup of the sector council is majority levy payers. So we have levy payers from both the beef and lamb sector in there. We have processors who, as kind of highlighted before, are levy payers as well. We have an independent, and then we also have a look if there are any other skills that are needed to be able to deliver. So if there are, and I guess an example of that in our sector is on halal. So we are making sure that there is somebody who is very, very aware and currently employed in the halal sector to be sat on the council to be able to help make sure that we are making those decisions in the right way. So there's been quite a bit of change to that, but I'd just highlight the main one is that any decisions that are made on what we do as a beef and lamb sector are made by the sector council. And I'll just say this, and I know that quite a lot of people know this already, but any levy that is collected in the beef and lamb sector has to be spent within the beef and lamb sector. So it has to be, so we can't collect money from beef and lamb and then spend it in sewers and oilseeds or in pork. We have to make sure everything is audited back. So every pound that is collected from the beef and lamb sector is spent within the beef and lamb sector in terms of delivery.
Yeah. Thank you, Will. Another question around fairness. So how will AHDB and the council deal with fairness in the vote if processor and farmer opinion differs, and equally if farmers have a different opinion, how will that be dealt with? So I guess you'll understand what the question is there. Will,
yeah, so,
you know, how do you balance the needs of processors and farmers, and equally if farmers have their own difference of opinion on how levy should be spent?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. I mean, essentially, it's how do we come to how are the final decisions made and balanced out? And I guess I would like to think that on a lot of things that we're actually quite aligned, that the supply chain is quite aligned, and it will be interesting to see how the votes come back. We've been very careful at the moment to make sure that we're not prejudging anything. So we're not in the process at the moment of commissioning any big new work or anything, because we want to make sure that we've been absolutely right in terms of taking into account what comes back. So the decision-making process will be that the results will go back to the sector council, and they will then be able to see basically what pre-farm gate levy payers have said, so what farmer levy payers have said, and what post-farm gate levy payers have said. And then they will be able to have a bit of a discussion around what that means. And so if there are any differences in terms of where we sit, the council will have to make a call on that. I think that the one thing that I would say is that any decision that is made, there will be a clear rationale for. So we'll be sharing. So this isn't going to be done behind closed doors. When we have the results from the votes, we'll be publishing the results from the votes. So you will see exactly what's been said, and you'll see exactly what the sector council will see in terms of the results. And then when the decision is made about what has been taken forward, the sector council will produce a report which basically explains the rationale behind that decision. Because I think whoever's asked this question is probably right. There may be one or two areas where there is a slight difference of opinion. And you know, and if you get something, we're asking this on a 1 to 5 scale, if you get something that sits at 2.5, then actually that's somewhere in the middle, and there's a big mix of opinion in there. So there's going to have to be a decision made in terms of what sort of scale things go up to, and actually how things are executed. And it may be that, you know, that they look at maybe changing the way we do something. So if something scores particularly badly, we may say, right, okay, in that case, we have to go away and either stop doing that or look at doing it in a different way. Or if something scores 5 out of 5 across the board, across everybody, you may say, well, actually, in that case, we want to increase the investment in that area. So it's difficult to say, but exactly kind of how this is going to how the results are going to play out at the moment. But what I will say is that there will be a very, very clear rationale for why the decision has been made, and we'll be very, very open and transparent in the results that come in. So people will be able to draw their own judgments from what we put forward.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Thank you. Another question, which is a good question for us to sort of come to a close on, unless anybody else has got any questions, please pop them in. Is around how this will continue in the future. So is this the only chance that people are going to have a say on how the levy is spent?
No, is a short answer to that. So we want this to become a bit of an ongoing process. So I don't think we're going, and there are two elements to this really. We can't be in a position where suddenly we're changing direction wildly every year. So if we have a vote every year, we can't be flicking from this to that to the other. And we know that some projects are longer term. So say we undertake some work on genetics, any outcome from the genetics program isn't going to be achieved within 12 months. It's going to be a longer burn. So what we're looking at asking at the moment is what we're looking at for the next 5 years. This isn't going to be the last chance people have to feed back on that though. Every year we'll be looking to have some sort of questions put forward to levy payers in this format. So as we've said, ratification of new members onto the council will happen every time. And with the way it works, there'll be people who roll on and roll off every year. So there will need to be at least a question on ratification that takes place every year. But the way we envisage it unfolding is that on an annual basis, some things might change. And I mean, this last 12 months or 24 months, COVID's come along and it's actually meant we've had to make a huge change in direction on one or two things. So if that came out, if we saw another, hopefully we don't, but if we saw another issue that turned up like COVID or something else that changed the way that we needed to operate, then that gives us the ability on an annual basis to go back and say, right, okay, this has changed, we need to revisit this. Or it may be that a big piece of work comes to a conclusion, and in that case we might go out and say to levy payers, right, okay, is this still relevant to your business in future, and would you like us to carry on exploring this? Or actually here are some other things that we could look at on that basis. So we'll be looking at having annual votes. There will be a main one every 5 years, which will look to set the strategy, but we will continue to come back. I think that I kind of want to get to a place where there's a bit of a pattern to what we're doing. So people will know at the same time every year they have the ability to be able to input on what we're doing at AHDB and have their say on the work that we're undertaking. And it's not just going to be about commission new work. We'll want to get feedback on what people think about what we're doing and what we've achieved. So I talked earlier on about the fact that once the results are out, that we will be out talking to people about them and explain why they've been put into practice. Well, alongside that, there'll be clear targets set by them. So actually, what we're going to be wanting is, as well as feedback on how you think we're doing. So are we doing the right thing? Now, having said that we're going to deliver the balance campaign and the domestic market is important, how do you feel that's gone? You know, we will be able to demonstrate back, and Liam will be able to demonstrate back some of the wins that we've had, and you know, some of those attitudinal change, and we'll be able to say to people, right, is that enough? If you've come into contact with any of our services over the last 12 months, or if you've been to our strategic farms, how good were they? You know, are they being done in the right way, or can they be better? So we want this to almost become a constant feedback loop where we're able to get accurate information back from levy payers on an ongoing basis, which I think, if we're honest with ourselves, we probably haven't done enough previously, and we'll be able to communicate that back and hopefully keep on an ongoing basis. So essentially what I'm saying is that each year there will be a vote, there will be an opportunity to be able to feed back into AHDB. There'll be more touch points in the year, but one main one. And each year, the other thing that we're going to be doing is having an open meeting. So there will be one opportunity, which will be both physical and digital, where we will get everybody together once a year and say, right, come and see what we're doing, come and see what's been delivered, come and see some experts talk about some of the things that are out there.
Great, thank you, Will. Thank you. Yeah, really good. And there is an email address for anybody that wants to get in touch about Shape the Future, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. shapethefuture@ahdb.org.uk. So if you go on there or jump on the website, there's a link through there from the Shape the Future page.
Great, thank you, Will. And I know Will and myself would be happy to take any direct email as well. If anybody has any comments about this evening or has any questions, then please feel free to fire those across to Will or myself. Our details are also on the website. We don't have any more questions, so thank you very much for everybody for listening this evening. Thank you very much to our presenters tonight, John, Liam and Will, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.